share his knowledge so that the persons connected with us on the social media of Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, along with this platform, gain their insights on a fascinating topic, which we quite often discuss, but coming from a person who is an expert of the checks and balances, is what we all intend to learn from him. Mr. Kale, you have already joined. You can hear this. And over to you, Mr. Duggal.
For giving me this opportunity. Good evening to one and all. On Republic Day, when we are celebrating the Indian Republic Day and the coming into force of the Indian Republic, the sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, in 2021, we are now being faced with the question, is cyberspace an essential element? The answer is a clear yes. If so, social media challenges, checks and balances, how much are they relevant in our day-to-day lives today? Let's begin with some fundamental scenarios. Internet came into being in 1969 with the coming of the ARPANET, which was a military network of networks. It got successful and moved on to academic universities. And finally, with the coming of the World Wide Web in the early 90s, the internet changed irreversibly. But it still had to wait for 2020 to see a magical steroidic kind of an effect. The coming of COVID-19 actually had, apart from other severe consequences on public health, had a very serious impact upon the way cyberspace was growing. So consequently, cyberspace suddenly started becoming the default central line for our day-to-day lives. The coming of COVID-19 and the national lockdowns effectively meant that we were now glued on to the internet. More and more people in the last 1 year have come on to the digital bandwagon. And there are all kinds of levels of majority of people when they are reaching out to the cyberspace. There are first-time users, there are seasoned users, there are digital natives, and of course, there are digital inhabitants or the digital migrants as what we call them. But having said that, there is now no denying the fact that internet has changed irreversibly. You can now no longer say that internet is a luxury. It's now an essential necessity. So in this ecosystem, social media comes to us as a default option. In fact, we haven't even begun realizing that internet has transformed almost all of us into becoming global authors, global transmitters, and global broadcasters of data. Because we are all generating data on a 24/7 basis, whether we like it or not, whether we are aware of it or not, whether we are even conscious of this exercise or not. And I think while we have all been transformed into this global data entities, the fact also remains is that India is seeing some peculiar trends. The first trend that I see is the great Indian vomiting revolution. Indians are vomiting data about themselves, their personal, professional, social lives without even understanding the legal ramifications of the same. So when we are actually littering all our vomitings across the internet, little do we realize that we are leaving behind electronic footprints, which will be used by both state and non-state actors for the purposes of effectively targeting you. Second things, we are still Indians and we believe that trust is an integral element of our DNA. So we as Indians like to trust whatever we see. No wonder phishing has emerged as one of the biggest cybercrimes that India has seen in the last 1 year. In fact, with the coming of COVID-19, friends, we have begun to see a new trend. The golden age of cybercrime has begun. And in this early stage of the golden age of cybercrime, we have begun to start seeing that the number one cybercrime activity across the world and in India is phishing. The process of, first of all, going ahead and winning your confidence, and then asking you, prompting you to either click an email link or an attachment, so that lo and behold, you can be made a victim of phishing, your monies can be taken away, your accounts can be emptied, and your data can be prejudicially impacted. In addition, we have begun to start seeing data theft, identity theft, and also frauds, financial frauds in a big way in the online ecosystem. So, in this entire perspective that we are talking about, social media begins to start assuming a completely different paradigm altogether. This very social media comes to us naturally. We don't even think twice before we publish things on social media. And now, with the comings of Instagrams, Twitters, Facebooks, and YouTubes, and even LinkedIn, we have begun to start seeing a new trend where people are publishing first and then trying to understand or cope up with the legal ramifications. So, the biggest challenge of social media is that the self restraint has gone out of the window. We have just thrown our towels of self restraint and we have jumped into this community bath called social media. And in this community bath, when we jump in without our towels, we have to be mindful of the consequences that are arising for us. We have to be mindful of the fact that whatever we say on social media is going to be documented somewhere, will be kept as electronic evidence against us, can be accessed by law enforcement agencies, by courts of law, by giving appropriate directions to the service providers. And more significantly, ultimately, can be used in a detrimental or prejudicial manner against your own legal interests. So you write something innocuous right now, it gets blown out of proportion, and people try to misquote you, or shall I say, mistrust, shall I say, go ahead and mismanage your projections of the message. And lo and behold, you have n number of problems. So when we talk about social media challenges, checks, and balances, we have to get our fundamentals very clear. First and foremost, our expectation that we will not be duly diligent, and the state, the government, the service provider will take care of all the mess that we create is the wrong perception. That's not going to happen. If you're expecting law to come to your rescue, think again. Law does not come to the rescue of those who actually are negligent or are sleeping on their rights, are not even exercising appropriate due diligence while they are discharging their day-to-day obligations in the digital ecosystem. So if you're expecting checks and balances from governments, think again. Those are not happening. Self-restraint has to be your starting point. You will have to hold back your horses. There's now a need for inculcating a culture of distrust and mistrust. For long, we have trusted content, what we see, and long we have realized that we are getting, shall I say, becoming victims of our undue blind trust that we have on information. So clearly, in this ecosystem, the checks and balances are first going to lie in our court. We have to be duly diligent, cautious, careful as we go forward. We will have to start inculcating a culture of distrust and mistrust concerning information. Let's not trust any information till such time we are able to independently corroborate the same on a social media platform or on search engines. Let's not be blindfoldedly trusting any information without even testing the authenticity or veracity or correctness thereof. Because if we do so, then we are jumping in a bowl of fire without any fire suit, without any fire protection. And clearly, we are going to get burnt. Our legal interests are going to be prejudicially impacted. So that's the current position. If President Trump of the US, the most powerful man in the world at that point of time, if his tweet accounts can be permanently suspended, his tweets can be deleted by these service providers, let's have things in context. Who are you and me? Why do we think that we are very important? And why do you think that whatever you will publish on social media will remain there for as it is, as long as posterity, and there'll be no interference? Increasingly, social media big tech companies are getting very powerful. And these big tech companies are increasingly getting more and more power to moderate your content. Should you go ahead and violate their community terms or their specific terms, that lo and behold, you could potentially be seeing that your social media posts are going to be prejudicially impacted. So, in this kind of a context, let's not rely upon law because law is taking its own sweet time. We need to understand that we are in India. India does not have a dedicated law on social media. Yes, we have a mother legislation being the Indian Information Technology Act 2000, but it is not specifically dealing with social media. However, by virtue of the 2008 amendments, it's come up with the concept of an intermediary under Section 21W of the Information Technology Act 2000. And that being so, that particular concept is getting extremely broad in its scope, application, and ambit. No wonder not just all social media companies, service providers, platforms come within the definition of intermediaries, but almost any entity who is dealing, handling, or processing data for and on behalf of another person or providing any service with respect to that data would also tend to be qualifying as intermediaries under the Indian cyber law. So Indian cyber law wants you to exercise due diligence. And I think it's there that the checks and balances are going to lie. Ignorance of law is no excuse in the eyes of law. If you're expecting that you can be ignorant of the Indian cyber law and law is not going to touch you and things are fine, really think again. In the Indian cyber law lies one of the most significant pieces of legislation that independent India has ever seen. In fact, when we passed this Information Technology Act 2000, almost 2 decades back, nobody had the slightest of ideas how this law is over the next couple of decades going to become as one of the three most fundamental legislations in Indian history. Why? It's the only law in India that impacts data and information in the electronic form, that impacts the use of computers, computer systems, computer networks, computer resources, as well as communication devices. So please make sure that your checks and balances pertaining to your conduct on social media is going to be tempered with by the legal framework, hence ensuring compliance with applicable provisions of the Indian cyber law has to become a starting point as you go forward. We also have to inculcate cybersecurity as a way of life. Because if you don't do so, the chances of you becoming victim of cyber crimes is going to be very, very high. During the COVID-19 times, I've recently written a book called New Cyber World Order Post-COVID-19, in which I've argued that the COVID-19 has actually leashed in and ushered in huge, humongous changes on cyberspace. And these changes will lead to a new cyber world order once we are successful in the fight against COVID-19. At that point of time, once we are conquering COVID-19, we would have entered into a new cyberspace where states will become very powerful, where cybercrime and cybersecurity breaches will become the new normal, and where increasingly your digital liberties are going to be tempered with, interfered with by state and non-state actors. And therefore, we are likely to see more and more migration onto the darknet. And social media represents the micro mechanism on which we believe that this kind of developments are beginning to get reflected. So in this kind of an ecosystem and this kinds of opening comments, I thought I would like to just kickstart our discussion. I have a small presentation. I can just share a couple of slides, but we'll be happy to take any specific questions as we go forward, because I think when I go through some of these slides, I believe you will be in a better position to understand that social media is like a whirlpool. And once you're going to navigate a whirlpool, it's going to require immense amount of skill and immense amount of training and hard work. And then also there's no surety whether you will be able to come out of the whirlpool or not. We have to be mindful of the fact that we may be acting in haste, but we should not be repenting at leisure. We should not be in a hurry to publish any content on social media Otherwise, it's going to come back and haunt us. And it's effectively going to let your neck be in the hands of other people who can then use it for the purposes of suing you, both for civil consequences, for criminal consequences, suing for you for damages by way of compensation, making you criminally liable for all your conduct that's happening. So it's a completely new paradigm. The law is pretty much deficient. Do not expect the law to come to your instant recourse if you find yourself getting stuck by the challenges of social media. Hence, capacity building becomes of crucial necessity. Hence, clearly, we have to focus more on our own exercise of self restraint, our exercise of due diligence while we discharge our obligations versus our transactions on social media. And mind you, the Indian law has made the electronic format legal. Anything that you publish on social media, audio, video, image, and text, is legal evidence, can be used against you in a court of law, and can be relied upon by the court to come up to any adjudication against you. On top of it, the electronic evidence that's invariably floating around so much on social media can now be officially filed and proved in a court of law as per the parameters of Section 65B of the Indian Evidence Act. This is as per the specific judgment of the Supreme Court in the latest Constitution Bench case of Arjun Pandit Rao Khotkar. So clearly, with this kind of a landscape, let me share with you some slides, and I would want to pause after some slides and we'll see how we can take our discussion forward. So clearly, when I'm talking about social media challenges, checks and balances, I need to know what's happening on the horizon. And the horizon tells me a very confusing picture. Recently, the government of Bihar has issued a letter which says that it's going to be a cybercrime if you're going to post defamatory, derogatory content against government officers or against the functionaries of the state or police officers. If you do so, appropriate action will be taken against you. Now, a lot of people are doing a lot of things on social media. So if you are going to be uploading child pornography on social media, don't think it's a child's play. Think that's just alarm bells ringing, because you're going to be booked for various charges of child pornography, because the law in India is very clear under Section 67 capital B of the IT Act. The moment you publish, transmit, cause to be published or transmitted anything pertaining to child pornography, that's a heinous offense. That's punishable with 5 years imprisonment and 10 lakh rupees fine. Further, we're bound to see more and more focus on even one portion of the IT Act, which makes it an offense when you browse child pornography. Whether you do it actually intentionally or not, the law is of no consequence in that regard. Identity theft on social media is constantly rising. Recently, a secretary in the government of India was forced to give a clarification on one of these social media platforms because somebody created an exactly similar looking account as his own with the picture of the concerned governmental officer, trying to mislead the users into believing that the said account was indeed that of the governmental officer. People are losing all kinds of things, data, reputation, monies, and whatnot on social media. Here is a case where so much of money in bitcoins was actually lost in a bitcoin scam that was actually being perpetuated using WhatsApp. And I think Twitter some months back saw also a similar scam where a lot of users got the so-called messages from the verified Twitter handles of important political personalities, which said that it was time for the political personalities to give back. So they decided to double your money, provided you give them in bitcoins in 1 hour. A lot of people fell actually a victim to this kind of an exercise and became clearly a victim of cybercrime. Now, once what's happened in the Capitol Hill in the US has come to our forefront, and that's been extensively documented on social media, including videos and stuff like that. It's very, very clear that social media can have a massive impact upon ourselves and our minds. When the president of a country can lash out on social media, then clearly these social media big tech companies are putting increasingly their house in order. They are saying, look, we are going to come down, we are going to remove such content, and we are going to make sure that we will not really tolerate any content which is in violation of the law. Imagine social media now being potentially misused for the purposes of instant loan app frauds. Clearly, we find that Telangana, there have been more than 50 FIRs that have been registered. People have been going ahead and promoting these kinds of instant loan apps using social media, asking people to instantaneously go ahead and get loan, but increasingly making them victims of new kinds of cyber criminal activities. Imagine you talked about the boys' locker room case. Imagine the girls' locker room case being replicated on social media. Here's a case of a girl who started rape talk on Snapchat, one of the social media platforms. And the police was investigating, but it's telling you people are all out to all kinds of misadventures and ill adventures on social media, thinking that they cannot be caught. And if you think that you can actually create fake accounts and create misinformation on social media as a birthright, think again. More and more countries are coming up with laws to regulate fake news. Further, there's a plea that's been filed in the Indian Supreme Court so as to basically ask for curbing of these fake accounts and misinformation on social media. It's correct that India does not have a dedicated law on fake news, but the Indian agencies are still relying upon the Indian Penal Code and the Indian IT Act for the purposes of coming down on fake news on social media. Now, what happens on social media today is the following. Deep fakes have become the norm of the day. Morphing somebody's pictures, somebody's videos for misrepresenting the image that was originally disseminated has now become very common. And I think that's what is a bigger challenge that social media companies and ecosystem stakeholders will have to increasingly address as we go forward. The golden age of cybercrime has begun. So the manifestation of this golden age of cybercrime is now increasingly being seen on social media. A lot of cyber criminal activities have massively increased on social media, especially during lockdowns, and children have become the biggest target victims of these kinds of attacks per se. On top of it, impersonation and identity theft are now the new mantras of today's social media existence. Almost anyone today is finding themselves to become, having become a victim of the social media cybercrimes, and nobody has crystal clarity as to how to completely protect yourself. Look, there are only two kinds of people in the world. One, who know that they have become a victim of cybercrime, and two, who do not know that they have become a victim in cybercrime. So, since cybercrime is going to be inevitable for us and will be a lifelong companion for us, I think the time has come that we need to now create more strategies at our own level so as to protect our digital presence on social media, as also our data and information, along with our reputations in the coming times. And all kinds of cases are coming in pertaining to misuse of information, of cyber criminal activities that are emerging on the social media bandwagon. On top of it, now social media has also begun to start seeing a sister trend of ransomware emerging known as fearware, where a computer contaminant comes into your system for the purposes of disseminating fear And already during COVID-19 times, there is so much fear and panic. Cyber criminals have actually weaponized this fear and panic as they have gone ahead in this direction of targeting people at will. Go to the darknet and you just get a sampling of what all is happening on social media. There's a cybercrime store that's selling access to more than 43,000 hacked servers. Because the darknet provides you complete anonymity, you often tend to get a feeling that you are completely safe and you cannot be identified, and therefore you can go ahead and engage in cyber criminal activities at your own will. We have to quickly realize that we are now in a very transient time. And in these transient times, we have to take care of our own selves as we go forward. Well, when I look at cyberspace and social media, I specifically find cyberbullying become very, very common, prevalent. In fact, cyberbullying has become the #1 challenge for Indian schools and universities today, because with now children increasingly doing online education and studies, they are beginning to start realizing that they have become victims of cyberbullying. Alternatively, children themselves are engaging in cyberbullying as we are going forward. On top of it, the more use of social media is also accompanied by a similar trend of massive increase of video conferencing. Though video conferencing brings across its own legal issues and challenges, they have to be also seen in the context of the challenges of social media, and the legal frameworks have to be appropriately addressed as we go forward. The coming of the work from home paradigm has brought in a new fervor, a new flavor to social media. People sitting at home are now more feverishly using social media because they know that there is no constraints. In office, they can't use so because their employers are watching, or there is some office decorum. But at home, people are doing multitasking, including being on social media and continuing to work from home, which has begun to start cropping up with its own teething problems. More and more people working from home are now increasingly being targeted by means of cyber security attacks, thanks to the attacks on their social media accounts and their work from home devices per se. Look at this particular figure, and it says that the work from home employees in India have been attacked 3.6 crore times by hackers. And there is a 242% rise in cyber attacks in India ever since the COVID-19 lockdown began, and ever since more and more companies started using the work from home paradigm. On social media, are you fully cyber secure? I don't think so. Look at the recent scenario of WhatsApp controversy. WhatsApp announced in the first week of January 2021 that it is amending its privacy policy, and the same will come into effect from 8th of February 2021. The privacy policy, as amended, was a complete affront to your liberties and to your digital privacy. Look, by and large, let's get one thing very clear. There's nothing known as free lunch. If something is being given world class to you, free of cost, please let's quickly realize that you have become the product. And therefore, if you have become the product, it's bound to be happening that your data is going to be potentially used by these service providers. So lo and behold, when WhatsApp has been actually giving you all these world-class informations and you think it's free, don't think it's free, because ultimately they're using your data. And WhatsApp has been very, very clear ever since it got acquired by Facebook. In its terms and conditions, it's been categorically saying all these years that whatever you are publishing on WhatsApp, audio, video, image, or text, is public information. You have no privacy attached to the same. And now, under the new amended privacy policy, WhatsApp is saying that I'm also going to be sharing your sensitive personal data, including your transaction details, your transaction amounts, your transaction payment methodologies, your credit card, debit card numbers, your internet banking numbers, your locations, your internet protocol addresses, not just to Facebook group of companies, but also to all their third-party business affiliates, business partners, and also service providers across the world. So lo and behold, your data is going to be shared across the world if you're going to be accepting the new amended policy. There's been a massive push against this move by WhatsApp to amend its privacy policy in India. Consequently, WhatsApp has said that it's currently temporarily postponing the implementation of its privacy policy till May 2021. So WhatsApp is not actually letting up its pressure. WhatsApp is very clear. It wants to put a pistol on the heads of 40 crore Indian users for the purposes of forcing them to either comply with the amended terms of their privacy policy or to quit their specific platform. When I look at the amended privacy policy of WhatsApp, it does not even tell me any kind of a whisper as to what specifically is it going to do vis-a-vis the cyber security of the data, of your sensitive personal data, which it will be sharing with third parties across the world. So I think cybersecurity has become so very important. And as users of social media, we must increasingly now focus more and more on how our cybersecurity of our data can be potentially more protected. Globally, there's already policy vacuum. Why? There's no one international cyber law in place. There's no one international cybersecurity law in place. And in this policy vacuum, countries are saying, I am not going to wait on indefinitely. So countries have begun to start coming up with their own national cybersecurity laws. These laws are specifically now going ahead and moving in the direction of regulating various activities of stakeholders pertaining to protection and preservation of cybersecurity across the world. So different countries have come up with their national cybersecurity laws, which also have a direct impact upon social media. So whether these are laws in China, in Vietnam, Thailand, Russia, Australia, or Singapore, these laws are increasingly impacting social media and the activities that are being done on social media. Clearly, fake news is now the new flavor of the season. If you're going to be on social media and you expect that you'll only be given sanitized content, think again. You're all being dished fake content, fake news all the time. These artificial intelligence algorithms are constantly tracking you, are looking at your preferencing, and thereafter, on the basis of the same, are dishing you appropriate elements of fake news, which I believe will have to be appropriately addressed. Fake news as a challenge on social media can appropriately be addressed by dedicated legal frameworks, which countries like Malaysia, Singapore, and France have already done. But when we are on social media, especially on platforms like WhatsApp, we should not have any expectation of privacy, because the privacy there is a non-existent ecosystem constituent. It's constantly evaporating. And unless you are not going to be careful in terms of protecting your privacy, the problem is that this privacy is going to be further evaded in this entire ecosystem of intermediaries that are happening, that are actually going forward and disseminating their services to users all across the world. And consequently, new kinds of cyber crimes are now emerging on social media. Earlier, social media was thought to be a relatively safe place, but lo and behold, due to our fear and panic, we have been constantly forwarding content without application of mind, and therefore we have all become pawns in the hands of cyber criminals for the perpetuation of newly emerging kinds of cyber criminal activities as we go forward. Needless to say, social media has had a very negative, prejudicial impact upon children, their mental growth, and their mental well-being as well, because of pedophiles constantly targeting these children on social media, and with Indian law enforcement agencies and the Indian law not necessarily being fully up to date in terms of protecting Indian children in this regard. So no wonder on social media, one of the biggest components in terms of users is that of children or minors or youngsters. And therefore protecting children from potential exposure to cyberbullying, cyber trolling, cyber stalking, cyber harassment, and other related cyber criminal activities becomes the bounden duty of the state. And while the state would want to do that through appropriate legal frameworks, I think it has to go far beyond. In the Indian context, I find that Section 79 of the Information Technology Act actually mandates these social media companies in their capacities as intermediaries to exercise due diligence while they discharge their obligations under the law. And as exercise of due diligence, they have to take appropriate steps to protect children. Now, by and large, we have not been able to effectively enforce Section 79 of the IT Act due to a very restrictive kind of an interpretation that's come up in the judgment of Shreya Singhal versus Union of India. Thanks to this judgment, the social media companies as intermediaries today are merely acting as spectators. They say, look, as per the Supreme Court judgment, we are not expected to be judges, so we cannot go ahead and remove any content till such time you either get as a court order or from an order from a governmental agency. So consequently, cybercrimes are massively increasing on social media as we are going forward. Become the new cybercriminal activity globally, and of appropriate enabling legal to regulate the same. This could actually be involving elements, whether it's cyberstalking or otherwise. Cyberstalking also has become a big challenge on social media. You find people are following you for no rhyme or reason, just harassing you. Way before the Information Technology Act 2000 had come into force, first cyber stalking case. At the time, the Indian IT Act had not yet come into force, and we tried to cover that with the ambit of the Indian Penal Code. We were not very successful, and we hoped that the Indian cyber law would provide more effective remedy to appropriate victims of cyber stalking. But unfortunately, the IT, or by virtue of its specifically either on cyberbullying or realize that the very severe the minds. Further, we have begun to start seeing massive.
Mr. Duggal, you will have to check your mic somehow off late for 2-3 minutes. It's not working properly.
Can you hear me, please?
Yeah, perfect.
Oh, thanks. So I began to start seeing that these elements of sexting, cyberbullying, cyber harassment have been happening phenomenally on social media. And unfortunately, the law has not yet come to your specific help, to your recourse, because the law has not yet gone so far ahead. We've been telling the government, and I've been advising the Indian government for the last more than 2 decades. In fact, I was not even keen that India should quickly pass its cyber law because it was a half-baked legislation. But then because of exigencies of politics and otherwise, the law got passed. And now we've realized that in the last 20 years, we've only been able to amend the IT Act once. Technology has been moving very, very fast, but we have not been able to do our stuff in this regard. Privacy is already evaporating, has evaporated to a large extent on social media. And in terms of checks and balances, while the law is expected to be amended in India, I think a better option will be that we need to be consciously careful. We need to only share information on a need to know basis. Just because on social media, everybody will be able to see my post does not mean that I must bear everything about my personal, professional, or social lives. Also, Let's not be in a hurry to get these virtual friends, virtual followers, and virtual supporters. Mind you, life is far beyond than just getting these maximum numbers of followers or cyber friends, as you would call them. It's more focused approach in today's context, which is desirable. And that is that we must take all steps to protect our privacy on social media, because then the world is changing irreversibly. The new cyber world order is coming in. And the cyber world order is going to actually compel us to change our thought processes. This cyber world order will be awaiting us once we are victorious in the fight against COVID 19. And I think we must have appropriate methodologies, preparation levels as we go forward. The reason for this is that we will have to start inculcating cyber resilience as a part of our day to day lives. The number of states which have actually gone ahead and come up with the legislations during COVID 19 have all a singular mandate, which is to strengthen the hands of the governments. So when I look at these various legislations, I realize that governments are increasingly strengthening their hands in COVID 19 times. In the Indian context, as I come towards the closure of my presentation, I want to tell you, please ensure compliance with the Indian cyber law. The Indian cyber law is India's most significant legislation. In fact, one of the top three legislations in Indian history, the other two being the Constitution of India and the Indian Penal Code. Why do I say that? Anything to do with electronic format is governed under the Indian cyber law. So the moment you use computers, computer systems, computer networks, computer resources, communication devices, as also data and information in the electronic form, you are governed under the cyber law. This is the cyber law which provides the remedy of seeking damages by way of compensation, up to 5 crores in certain circumstances under Section 43 of the IT Act. It also provides a remedy of seeking unlimited damages by way of compensation under Section 43A of the IT Act. It's also gone ahead and defined various cyber crimes which can be invoked at various points of time. Intermediaries have been given a special status. They've actually been focused and told that we are giving you a special kind of a statutory exemption from legal liability because if you are going to follow the provisions of law, then we will not going to be make you liable under the Indian IT Act, and it's the Shreya single judgment that's gone ahead and upheld these liability of intermediaries, which assume more significance in the context of social media companies in today's scenario. But now the winds of changes have begun to start flowing. In the US, President Trump had last year issued an executive order which asked the Department of Justice to relook at the ways and mechanisms on how the statutory exemption from legal liability granted under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act can be potentially reviewed and revised, and how these social media companies can now be made more liable as you go forward. Well, as my law firm and as a person who's heading my law firm, I can tell you every day is a very exciting day. This is what other people talk about us, but I can tell you that we every day we keep on learning so much. Technology is moving so rapidly, and the one thing that we have learned, I have personally learned in my last 25 years in this sector, is that I know nothing in the morning when I wake up. Why? Because technology has been a great teacher. It's been constantly moving forward, and it's actually constantly egging you, propelling you to go ahead and look at these nuances. And at our law firm, Pavan Duggal Associates, which is India's niche technology law firm, which works on the intersection of law and technology, we help companies ensuring their compliances under the Indian cyber law. We assist intermediaries to exercise due diligence while they do their duties under the Act. In addition, I'm also the chancellor of an online university called Cyber Law University. This university is providing various short courses for people across the world. These are 25-hour courses. And as of now, in the last 2.5 years, we've had more than 25,500 students from 172 countries, speaking 52 national languages, who've done these various courses on different aspects of cyber law, cybercrime law, cybersecurity law, artificial intelligence law, blockchain law, and the like. And we also now specifically introduced 4 international certification courses, including 1 international certification course on cyber law. So if you really want to know more about these nuances, this international certification course will be a fantastic option for you, because in this 12-week course, you are getting to know what's the cutting edge across the world. You're getting to hear what's not being taught in law schools across the world. And you're getting to hear from a practical practitioner's perspective of the elements that you need to know, which will then go ahead and become the basis for intelligent decision making in the coming times. I like to just conclude by saying social media is here to stay. Internet is going to be more and more an integral part of our day-to-day lives. But cyber law today represents important, fascinating aspects of our lives. According to me, cyber law is going to be your lifetime companion. Therefore, in the context of social media, please ensure that your activities are in compliance with the Indian cyber law or the relevant cyber law in the relevant jurisdiction where you are located. Try to ensure that you are on the right side of the law, because once you comply the law, that will help you to protect you, your assets, your data, your privacy, your reputation, and your digital present, as also your digital future in the coming times. So we cannot now run away to the Himalayas. We cannot say there are so many problems on social media, so let's exit. We have to now live along with social media. Therefore, let's try to protect ourselves through compliances. Let's try to incorporate cybersecurity as a way of life. And let's try to go ahead and maneuver through various challenges that social media has come forward. The checks and balances are many in the system, whether it's in the hands of government, whether it's in the hand of the social media service providers, whether it's in the role of the legislations in providing statutory exemption from legal liability to social media companies, or whether it's in your own hands. I think till such time as you move forward, please make cyber resilience, cyber due diligence, cyber hygiene, and cyber safety as integral elements of your approaches as you move forward in your various interactions on social media. Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'll be happy to take any specific questions in this regard. Over to you, Mr. Chairperson. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those specific questions, please.
Yes, sir. This is by Sajjaram. Android is being used as a popular operating system. This operating system collects various statistics and shares with Google's. When we buy an Android phone, we even indirectly purchase operating systems. How to avoid Android to share this user data?
See, you have to be very clear. If you have to use Android, please realize that Android is ultimately developed by Google. So go through its terms and conditions to see how your data is being dealt with by the Android system, ecosystem, and the operating system as a whole. Try going ahead and looking at your privacy settings to the extent possible, but do not put all your eggs into one basket, because Android is one of the most attacked systems in the world. Last year, there were 450,000 new infections that we saw on Android in 1 year. So I think you will have to be duly diligent. We cannot run away. There are only 2 options that are currently available broadly, whether it's Android or whether it's the Apple. You can pick and choose what you want to do. There are goods and not so good features for both of these operating systems. But whatever you do, please read the terms and conditions. And if possible, go and look at your privacy of the relevant apps that you're using. Try as far as possible to reclaim whatever privacy that you can, so that it can potentially be helpful for you for purposes of protecting your legal interests in the coming times. Thanks.
Then this is Aadhaar card privacy is still one of the most controversial. Can you please throw some light on that?
Aadhaar is full of controversy. And if I'm you, I can tell you one thing. If you have a choice not to use Aadhaar, please exercise that choice. Why? Because Aadhaar ecosystem is thoroughly unsafe. And there are so many cybersecurity breaches that are happening in Aadhaar ecosystem as a whole. Much that the Aadhaar Act 2019 has come across, that's not fundamentally changed. The Supreme Court judgment in Aadhaar, the majority judgment tended to give a certification of appropriateness and security to Aadhaar. I think it's time that India needs to revisit that particular approach because I believe cybersecurity breaches are one of the biggest challenges for Aadhaar. And because the legal frameworks have not been appropriately well defined, because the cybersecurity has not been made an integral part of the intrinsic architecture of Aadhaar ecosystem, we are beginning to find more and more breaches in the Aadhaar ecosystem happening. The UIDAI, or the Unique Identification Authority of India, has been filing dozens of cases for all these cybersecurity breaches all over the years. And I think if that's happening, if you have a choice, it's best not to use Aadhaar because Aadhaar is linked with this, your eyes, iris scan, and your thumb impression. And I think these are irrepressible. If this data is going to be potentially compromised in the coming times, you could be having potential challenges because it may tantamount to loss of your digital identity. So, to the best extent possible, till such time the cybersecurity issues and nuances in the Aadhaar ecosystem are not appropriately well addressed, I think it'll be best that you should stop playing or paying much heed or reliance on Aadhaar as either a means of identification or as a means of some kind of identity management or otherwise. I think we have other better alternatives to rely upon, whether it's passports or driving licenses or any other form of identity, which can actually go ahead and prove your identity in a better manner. But if the government in the coming time appropriately addresses the issues pertaining to cybersecurity, then I think we could look at extensively using Aadhaar. But as of now, it's best that you are very careful when you use Aadhaar.
Uh, this is by Rishabh Soni. He says, how can one deal with the negative comments on an online comments or on an online reputation crisis?
Online reputation, online reputation is going to be one of your biggest assets in the present and the future. And these negative comments can potentially have a dampening impact upon your online reputation. But you can't completely prevent that. And you should not go in a means to directly go frontal and confront the person giving the negative comment. It'd be much more better that you rather supplement your work with positive content. Let positive commenting increase about you and your work. And ultimately, if there are more positive comments, they may ultimately tend to bury the negative comment, which will go down and deeper into the search mountain. And the search engine is only going to look at the top and not at the very bottom. But ultimately, this is a challenge that everybody will have to face. You're not running away from it. You cannot please everybody in the world. Somebody somewhere is going to feel jealous about you or will not be happy about you and will be writing about you, against you, whether anonymously or in his or her own name. I think we just have to consciously be focusing more on creating positive content about you and your work, your reputation, and your goodwill. And if that's repeatedly, uh, shall I say, published on social media, that can help you in enhancing your online reputation management in the coming times. Thanks.
Yeah, this is by Sanjaram. Various states and non-state agencies are asking for Aadhaar details, for example, phone companies, etc. So how to prevent that?
You just have one option. Just tell them I don't have an Aadhaar. Supreme Court has said that Aadhaar is now no longer mandatory. So they will ask for Aadhaar because that's their default option that they ask for. But once you say that you don't have Aadhaar, then they will tell you, sir, then you give me any alternate remedy, maybe your passport, maybe your driving license, maybe your election ID card. So it's better to use those IDs of the government because they're not connected with your biometrics. The problem is the central identities repository of the Aadhaar may be safe. But because there's so much of interlinking of Aadhaar with a lot of services, whether it's income tax, whether it's banking, whether it's the company's MCA portal or otherwise. The problem is the ecosystem has become very, very leaking and full of cybersecurity breaches. And it's this very ecosystem that presents immense trouble. So as I said, if you have a choice, you should begin with a default saying, I don't have Aadhaar, or I don't want to use Aadhaar. Now, if you say the argument that I don't want to use Aadhaar, people will then insist, give me Aadhaar. But you can always say that I don't have Aadhaar. Because if you say I don't have Aadhaar, they can't force you to get Aadhaar. And Aadhaar is no longer mandatory yet. Start relying upon other mechanisms if you really want to protect your biometric data in the coming times. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Duggal, for the engaging session. And tomorrow, friends, going ahead with this on the cybercrime, etc. Tomorrow, the session would be on hacking and liability under law by Dr. A. Nagaratna, an associate professor of law and coordinator of the Advanced Center on Research, Development and Training in Cyber Law and Forensic. She is the associate professor in National Law School of India, University, Bangalore. So do stay connected with us. And on behalf of all those participants who are watching us live on the Facebook, as well as on the YouTube, as well as on this platform, I thank Mr. Duggal. And once again, happy Republic Day to one and all. Stay blessed, stay safe, and thank you, Mr. Duggal.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity and wishing you all the best. Thanks and a very happy Republic Day. Thank you.